After Rebirth, I no longer insisted on my husband, the commander. This time, I decided to put my sister's name on the marriage license. I would give Jake exactly what he wanted. I'd be the one to dress my sister in the wedding gown, to place the engagement ring on her finger. I'd orchestrate every encounter between them. When he took her to New York City, I'd head south to the University of Miami without a word. Because in my past life, even when I was over 50, he and our son were still begging me for a divorce, begging me to finalize his relationship with my sister. In this new life, reborn, all I wanted was to spread my wings and leave romance behind. Just fill out your name and give it to me. Jake tapped his fingers impatiently on the table. I stared at the marriage license, my fingertips tracing the rough edges of the paper, lost in thought. In my past life, I'd written my own name with excitement, then eagerly dragged Jake to buy wedding favors, only to be met with a barrage of insults. He rushed back to make ginger tea for Chloe, who had her period. Yeah, I know, I mumbled, feigning indifference. I glanced up at his anxious expression, his eyes flicking constantly to his watch. He was wearing a white shirt, sleeves rolled up to his elbows, revealing his toned forearms. Chloe loved him dressed like this. She always said he looked clean-cut and fresh. If you're busy, go ahead, I said, forcing a casual tone, suppressing the bitterness rising in my throat. I'll hand it in when I'm done. He visibly relaxed, his voice softening. Don't worry, we're getting married. I'll take care of you. But please don't be jealous of Chloe anymore. It's bad for her reputation if people find out. I remained silent. In my past life, I'd explained countless times. But in his eyes, I was just a jealous and petty older sister, unable to tolerate her gentle and kind younger sibling. He didn't say anything else, just turned and hurried away. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart, but my mind replayed scenes from my past life. On our wedding night, he spent the entire night with Chloe, claiming she was sick. He only took Chloe with him when he was stationed in New York, saying she'd never been there before. Even on the day our son was born, Jake was too busy comforting a heartbroken Chloe after her divorce to be present. Mom, just divorced Dad. You're not as good as Aunt Chloe in any way, our son whispered in my ear. Dad's been miserable with you for so long. Just let him go. I looked at my indifferent husband on the hospital bed. He remained silent. That deathly silence was all the confirmation I needed. I bit my lip hard until I tasted blood, then slowly released it. No, not this time. I wouldn't make the same mistakes. I picked up the pen and slowly wrote 2 words in the applicant section. Chloe Miller. Jake, if you loved her so much, you could have her. I handed the completed application to the clerk, took the marriage certificate, and turned to leave the registry office. I felt no sadness, only an indescribable sense of relief. Chloe and I were taken in by the Millers after our parents died in a work accident. Chloe was charming and knew exactly how to flatter, coaxing the Millers into treating her better than their own daughter. Mrs. Miller, in particular, had her sights set on Chloe marrying Jake, but Chloe's single phrase, "I don't want to compete with my sister," made Jake willingly marry me. In reality, she was just stringing Jake along. Back then, he was only a captain, and she was waiting for someone better. I went to the university, clarified the procedures, and calculated the estimated living expenses. Then, I walked home with a lighter heart. Back at Jake's military housing, I heard Chloe's coquettish voice the moment I stepped inside. Jakey, are you sure it's okay to be here with me instead of Sarah? Will she be mad? I can spend time with her anytime, Jake replied, his voice tender. But you always have such bad cramps. I don't want you to be alone. Chloe giggled, then feigned sadness. Will you still be nice to me after you and Sarah are married? Of course, Jake's voice was firm. Who else would I be nice to? If your sister is mean to you, I'll divorce her. I clenched my fists, barely holding back the tears. Even reborn, hearing my husband speak so coldly about me still stung. I composed myself and walked into the room as if nothing was amiss. Jake emerged from Chloe's room, a slightly embarrassed look on his face. I just checked on Chloe. She wasn't feeling well. I gave a non-committal hum and turned to go to my room. In my past life, I had fought with him countless times about their overly intimate behavior. This time I didn't want to waste my time or energy. He stopped me. Sarah, Maybe we should buy some wedding favors and hand them out to the other wives on base. I looked at him, surprised. I figured this was his way of trying to make up for not arguing with me. No, it's not necessary. I don't need all that fuss. He looked taken aback, probably unable to imagine me refusing. Sarah, are you upset that Jake was taking care of me? Chloe came out of the room looking all innocent and wronged. She was wearing the vintage dress I'd bought specifically for our wedding photos, the one I'd scrimped and saved for 6 months to buy in my past life and hadn't even worn once. Noticing my gaze, Chloe stammered, I saw it on your bed and it looked so pretty. I wanted to try it on. I forgot to take it off. She looked down at her fiddling fingers, the picture of a child who'd made a mistake. Jake instinctively started, Sarah, don't... I cut him off, my voice calm. It looks good on you. Keep it. I haven't worn it anyway. I could smell the faint scent of blood and sweat on the dress. It brought back memories of me running home in the middle of the night, crying. Just thinking about it made my stomach churn. Under their stunned gazes, I returned to my room and locked the door. I pulled out my folder. Inside was my acceptance letter, University of Miami. I'd always loved the South, and it had the finance program I was so excited about. In my past life, I'd given up my education for Jake, content to stay home and take care of his parents. This time, I still had a chance. This time, I would live for myself. I flipped through the calendar. 10 days. In 10 days, I could leave this place. Time was tight, but I had to prepare. Every second counted. A knock startled me. I opened the door impatiently. Jake stood there holding a bowl of noodles, his voice gentle. Hungry? I made you some noodles. I hesitated. In my past life, he was either cold and distant or verbally abusive. It had been a long time since I'd seen this tender side of him. No thanks, I ate out. No way. You never spend money on yourself. His words stung. I used to scrimp and save, spending most of my earnings on him, buying him gifts. Now, with college on the horizon, I had to be careful with every penny. I met his gaze, my voice steady. I remember giving you $50 a few days ago for wedding stuff. You didn't buy anything, did you? Give it back. His hand froze, and he offered an awkward explanation. That money? I bought Chloe some new sandals. I couldn't help but scoff. Seriously? Again? Well, if there's nothing else, I'm going to bed. I'll give you the money tomorrow, he said, a hint of anger in his voice. We're getting married. Do you really have to be so petty? I snorted. So I can't even be upset when you spend my hard-earned money on someone else? He knew he was wrong, but muttered, unbelievable. I didn't bother arguing, slamming the door shut. Over the next few days, I sold some of my less valuable possessions, trinkets that once held so many memories from my past life. Now they seemed like nothing more than cheap junk. I packed them up and sold them to a junk dealer for a pittance. That afternoon, as I continued packing, Jake appeared, holding out a $50 bill. His voice was stiff. Here's your money. I took the money and nodded. Thanks. He watched me, his expression unreadable. His eyes fell on my packed suitcase. I'm planning to take Chloe with me to New York first. You don't have to pack. I continued packing, simply nodding. He seemed unnerved by my lack of reaction. What's gotten into you lately? You're like a different person. I turned to him impatiently, not wanting any confrontation. Even though Jake didn't love me, if he found out that Chloe's name was on the marriage license, he might try to remarry me for her sake. I wanted nothing more to do with either of them. Nothing, I'm just packing my things, so I can move back home when you go to New York. He seemed relieved, then added, I'm not saying you can't come to New York. It's just that Chloe's never been there, and she wants to see it. I'll send for you in a few months. I nodded absently. In my previous life, he hadn't sent for me for 8 whole years. Not until Chloe married a rich army brat from New York did he finally bring me there. He watched me, uncomfortable. Usually when we were alone, I would chatter nonstop. Now my silence made him fidget. Didn't you always want to take wedding photos? Let's go to the studio tomorrow. That wasn't going to work. I planned to buy some college supplies tomorrow. I was about to make an excuse when Chloe walked in, looping her arm through Jake's. Jakey, what studio? I want to take pictures too. Jake smiled and patted Chloe's head. Sure, we'll all go tomorrow. You two go. I have things to do tomorrow. Jake frowned. What's more important than our wedding photos? We'll take the photos first, and then I'll go with you to buy whatever you need. His tone was firm, leaving no room for argument. Chloe chimed in. Yeah, Sarah, you're not going just because of me, are you? I didn't want to argue, so I agreed. Early the next morning, I could hear Jake trying to coax Chloe out of bed. The bright red numbers on the calendar reminded me, 4 days. In 4 days, I would be free from this life. By the time they finally emerged, I was about to lose my patience. Jake fussed over Chloe, pouring her hot water and washing her face. I had been so blind in my past life, foolishly believing that he would treat me the same way. Lost in thought, I barely noticed Jake nervously approaching me with a small box in his hand. Mrs. Davis said it's fashionable to wear wedding rings now. I bought you one. I didn't take it. There had been no ring in my previous life. Chloe, upon seeing the ring, immediately pouted. Ooh, pretty! I want one! I waved my hand dismissively. Take it. Jake's face darkened. Don't be silly. This is our wedding ring. Chloe snatched the ring and slipped it onto her finger, flashing it at Jake. Jakey, doesn't it look good on me? Jake gazed at Chloe with pure adoration, nodding dumbly. Then he turned to me, guilt evident in his eyes. I'll buy you another one later. I shrugged. I'd heard his empty promises countless times. None had ever been kept. At the photo studio, Chloe went first, even taking a number of photos with Jake. When it was our turn, the photographer raised his camera, then lowered it awkwardly. Oh, sorry, I seem to be out of film. I silently cheered, keeping my face neutral. Oh, well, never mind then. As we left the studio, Jake pulled a train ticket from his pocket and handed it to me. It was a standing room only ticket to New York, leaving in 4 days. I'll go get settled, and I'll be waiting for you in New York. The trip to New York was 3 days and 3 nights. I didn't know how he expected me to manage standing for that long. Besides, there was only one spot for a spouse to accompany him. Where was I supposed to stay when I got there? But asking these questions now wouldn't get me any good answers. Seeing me take the ticket, Jake visibly relaxed. Don't worry. Even if you don't live on base, you'll still be my only wife. I'll treat you well from now on. Chloe is just like a sister to me. I softened slightly. He had never spoken such sweet words before. Suddenly, a car swerved around the corner, heading straight for us. Jake pulled Chloe into his arms, dodging out of the way. In the chaos, someone shoved me. I saw the car coming right at me, but my body froze in terror. The car swerved at the last moment, clipping me and sending me sprawling. Pain shot through me, my vision blurring. The driver jumped out of the car, frantically asking, "Ma'am, are you all right? Are you okay?" A crowd began to gather, murmuring. My gaze found Jake through the throng of people. He was holding Chloe, comforting her, completely oblivious to me. Or maybe he noticed and simply didn't care. I gave a bitter laugh, the last flicker of hesitation extinguished. So much for treating me well from now on. The driver took me to the hospital. After a series of tests, they determined it was mostly bruising and a minor internal injury. Lying in the hospital bed, I ached all over, but my mind was strangely calm. Late that night, Jake came in looking exhausted. When he saw I was awake, a flicker of panic crossed his face. "Sarah, how are you feeling? Are you okay?" I looked at him coldly, saying nothing. He wrung his hands, offering a nervous explanation. "Chloe." She was a little shaken up, so I stayed with her. Under my gaze, he trailed off. "Sarah, listen. It all happened so fast. Chloe was closer to me and I just reacted." He paused, searching for the right words. "I didn't know you'd get hit." I interrupted him, my voice flat. "When are you leaving for New York?" He answered cautiously, "Tomorrow." "I see, I'm tired, you can go." I closed my eyes, dismissing him. Jake seemed to want to say something more, but he eventually left. Mrs. Miller came the next day, carrying a thermos and beaming with a smile. "Sarah, dear, Jake asked me to come take care of you. Are you feeling any better?" "Much better, thank you, Mom." She ladled some soup for me, chattering away. That Jake, always so clumsy. I don't know if he can even take care of Chloe properly. She stopped mid-sentence, as if realizing what she'd just said. "Mom," I said, "Chloe is the one who married Jake." Mrs. Miller froze, taking a moment to process my words. What are you saying?" "I put Chloe's name on the marriage application." Mrs. Miller's initial shock quickly turned to elation. "Sarah, you're such a good girl. I knew you were the most sensible one. She clasped my hand excitedly. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for letting them be together. I gave a faint smile, saying nothing. Letting them be together? No, I was letting myself be free. Mrs. Miller had always preferred Chloe. Even after I spent years dutifully caring for her in my past life, she still left her entire inheritance to Chloe. Mom, don't tell Jake or Chloe about this yet. Mrs. Miller grinned. Of course, dear, I understand. So, what are your plans now? I'm leaving in a few days, I said, keeping my destination vague. Mrs. Miller wanted to ask more, her mind clearly preoccupied with their wedding. I closed my eyes, pretending to sleep. I left the hospital without telling anyone. Before leaving, I wrote a letter to Jake. I'm heading south on a train. I know you've always loved Chloe. I'm giving you my blessing. Our time together has run its course. I wish you both happiness. I placed the letter, the train ticket to New York, and the marriage certificate in an envelope, and mailed it to his address in New York. Then, I grabbed my suitcase and headed for the train station. The Miami air was humid and warm, a stark contrast to the crisp air I was used to. I stood before the University of Miami, still slightly in disbelief. Walking across campus, I felt a sense of rebirth. During the day, I sat in class, absorbing knowledge like a sponge. At night, I worked at a small diner, bussing tables and washing dishes until my back ached and my feet throbbed. But this exhaustion felt grounding. A month later, I had settled into this busy but fulfilling routine. Then I saw Jake standing at the bottom of the dorm building. Sarah, why did you do this? His voice was filled with anger and confusion. Why did you put Chloe's name on the marriage license? Why didn't you come to New York? I looked at him coldly. I don't want a husband whose heart belongs to someone else. It's disgusting. It's agonizing. He stared at me in disbelief. How can you talk like this? You were never like this before. I turned away, nausea rising in my throat. I couldn't bear to look at him, not even for a second. Jake, I just want to focus on my studies and start a new life. Chloe is the one you've always wanted, isn't she? You two should cherish each other and leave me alone. He ran a hand through his hair in frustration. What are you talking about? I scoffed. What kind of siblings cuddle and sneak kisses? I'd once walked in on him kissing a sleeping Chloe. The tenderness in his eyes was something I would never forget. Shame flickered across his face, quickly replaced by anger. Sarah, don't talk nonsense. There's nothing going on between Chloe and me. Your so-called sibling affection is utterly repulsive to me. Let me go and let yourself go. His face turned pale, but he didn't know what to say. I remembered the fear of being a burden when I first arrived at the Millers. I often went hungry. One night, I was so hungry I snuck out to the yard and ate leaves. Jake saw me. He shared his snacks with me, comforting me. Don't worry, Sarah. I'll protect you. That moment of warmth had trapped me. That's why, in my past life, even though Jake didn't love me at first, I still married him. For the next few days, Jake lingered around campus. I avoided him, determined to have no contact with him. I never expected Jake to go to the dean and try to have me withdrawn from school. When I was summoned to the dean's office, I walked in, and there he was, sitting across from Dean Thompson, his posture stiff and tense, as though he were trying to control the fury that radiated from him. A mixture of confusion and rage surged within me. Jake, what the hell are you doing? His gaze locked onto mine, and I could practically feel the weight of his frustration. What gives you the right to try and force me out of school? I demanded, my voice sharp, cutting through the tension in the room. I want you to come home with me, he said, his voice low but firm, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. Jake stood abruptly, closing the distance between us with long strides. He reached for my hand, but I instinctively recoiled, stepping back as though his touch could burn me. Home? I repeated, my tone laced with disbelief and bitterness. You mean to watch you and Chloe be all lovey-dovey while I sit there pretending it's fine? His expression darkened instantly, the flicker of guilt replaced by defensiveness. Sarah, don't be ridiculous. We're married. His words were sharp, like a slap across the face. I stared at him, incredulous. Her name is on the marriage license, Jake. She's the one in your heart. The words stung, but they were true, and I couldn't ignore the reality of it. His face turned an ugly shade of green, his jaw clenched so tightly I could hear the faint grind of his teeth. That was a mistake, he snapped, taking a step closer. Mistakes can be corrected. I'm trying to make it right. His words, so familiar, shattered something inside me. My heart sank, the memory of past promises echoing in my mind. You've said that before, Jake, I whispered, barely able to choke out the words. I heard it all before, only for you to turn around and go straight back to her. I turned to the dean, my voice raw with emotion. Dean Thompson, please. I really want to continue my studies here. I can't let him take this from me. The dean, who had been silent up until now, looked at me with a thoughtful expression before turning his attention to Jake. Mr. Miller, he began, his tone firm and no nonsense. You have no official connection to Ms. Miller. You cannot withdraw her from this school. Relief flooded through me, but I refused to look at Jake, not wanting to see the anger or frustration that was sure to be there. Jake opened his mouth to argue, but Dean Thompson held up a hand, silencing him with a quiet authority. Mr. Miller, unless there is something else, I suggest you leave. I have other matters to attend to. Jake's eyes burned with fury, but he said nothing more. With one last venomous glare at me, he turned on his heel and stormed out of the office. I exhaled, my hands trembling as I sat back down. The weight that had been pressing on my chest slowly began to lift, but the ache in my heart remained. Jake continued to haunt me like a ghost. His constant harassment became unbearable, affecting my studies. To make matters worse, Chloe arrived. Jakey, please, let's go home and get a divorce. I don't want this. I don't want to steal my sister's husband. I'm a terrible person. She clung to Jake's shirt, sobbing dramatically. Jake pulled her into a comforting embrace, patting her back. There, Chloe. Don't cry. It's not your fault. We'll go home right now. It's my fault. I shouldn't have put you through this. Chloe continued her pitiful crying act, then made a move to kneel before me. I'm sorry, Sarah. Please don't be mad at Jake. I know you misunderstood about him and me. Don't kneel, Chloe. It's my fault. I'm sorry you were put in this position, Jake said, glaring at me as if accusing me of being unreasonable. A crowd of students had gathered, whispering and pointing. I couldn't stand this farce any longer. I turned and walked away. Let them put on their show. I wasn't going to be a part of it. Chloe had her ways because Jake didn't show up again that day. I threw myself into my studies, joining the math club, where I met Ethan Carter. He was tall and thin, with dark-rimmed glasses, and a bright smile that was easy to trust. He was brilliant at math, and often helped me with my studies. Slowly, he became my rock, offering a kind of companionship I hadn't realized I'd been missing. We became good friends, and in a way, his presence helped fill the emptiness left by Jake. His easy laughter and thoughtful conversations were a refreshing escape from the emotional chaos I had been living in. I felt like I could breathe again. Just when I thought my life was finally on track, Jake's letters started arriving, one after another, relentless. Sarah, are you still mad at me? I know I messed up. Come back. Sarah, Chloe is pregnant. It's my child. I know it's hard for you to accept, but please believe me. You're the only one I truly love. Sarah, this has gone on long enough. What do I have to do to make you forgive me? Each letter felt like a betrayal, a fresh wound. I tore them to shreds and threw them in the trash, my hands trembling. How could he still think I would go back to him? After everything, after all the lies, the hurt, the manipulation, he still thought I was weak enough to return. I didn't understand how he still believed he could undo the past, how he could believe that I would forgive him, just because he said the right words. It was almost laughable, if it weren't so heartbreaking. One evening, as I sat alone in my room, Ethan knocked on the door. He had noticed the weight on my shoulders, the silence in my replies, and he knew something wasn't right. "Hey," he said gently, sitting down across from me. "I can tell something's bothering you. You don't have to talk about it, but I'm here if you do." I looked at him, appreciating the concern in his eyes, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't entirely alone. Jake's shadow, for just a moment, seemed to fade. The diner was filled with the familiar smell of cooking oil as I bussed tables, my hands moving on autopilot. The clatter of dishes, the hum of the coffee machine, and the chatter of the customers blended into a constant, almost comforting noise. I glanced up and saw Ethan sitting in a corner booth, his dark-rimmed glasses catching the light. He smiled at me, that warm, genuine smile I had come to rely on. I couldn't help but feel a flutter in my chest, but I quickly looked away, focusing back on my work. When my shift ended, the diner had begun to empty out, the night crowd slowly tapering off. Ethan was still there, a few untouched plates in front of him, the steam from his coffee rising into the air like the last remnants of a long day. "Join me for a bite?" he asked, his voice casual but inviting as he gestured to the seat opposite him. I shook my head. "No thanks, I already ate." I declined, but my stomach betrayed me with a loud growl, echoing through the quiet diner. My face flushed in embarrassment, and I quickly muttered, "Guess I didn't eat enough." Ethan chuckled, a low, rich sound that was impossible to ignore. "Don't be shy, come sit down." I hesitated for a moment, then gave in. I slid into the booth across from him, the soft leather creaking under my weight. A hot pot of soup sat between us, its steam rising in delicate curls. The warmth of it was a welcome relief against the cool night air that had followed me inside. I dug in, savoring the rich flavor, forgetting all table manners. The warmth spread through me, both from the food and from the unexpected comfort of Ethan's company. "Slow down," Ethan teased, watching me with an amused smile. "No one's going to steal it from you." I barely registered his words as I continued eating, the soup feeling like the first real nourishment I'd had in weeks. Halfway through my meal, I felt a tickle on my cheek, and I froze. I looked up to find Ethan holding a small grain of rice between his fingers, his smile widening. "Your face looked hungry," he teased gently. I blushed, feeling a heat rise in my cheeks that had nothing to do with the soup. My gaze dropped to my bowl, suddenly aware of how messy I must have looked. "I guess I am," I muttered, suddenly shy. But even as the words escaped me, I knew something was different. The way he looked at me, the way his eyes softened when they met mine. There was no mistaking it. He liked me. The quiet intensity in his gaze made my heart race, and I couldn't help but feel a warmth that had nothing to do with the soup. Everything else could wait. For the first time in a long while, it felt like there was something more important than my past, or the ghost that still haunted me. Winter break arrived, and with it, Mrs. Miller's persistent calls, one after another, urging me to come home for the holidays. They had raised me after all, and despite everything that had happened, I couldn't be completely heartless. I still owed them something, even if it was just a visit. After much deliberation, I bought a train ticket, my hands trembling slightly as I packed the small bag of gifts I had bought for the Millers. The thought of returning to Millerton stirred a strange mix of emotions in me, but I couldn't ignore the guilt that weighed on my chest. As soon as I stepped inside the Miller house, the air felt thick with tension. I was barely inside the front door when I heard a shrill voice pierce the silence. "Jake Miller, what do you mean?" I froze. Chloe stood there, her pregnant belly clearly visible, her face flushed with anger as she shouted at Jake. My heart dropped in my chest. "I'm carrying your child. I'm not here to be treated like this." Chloe's voice trembled with frustration, her words sharp, but her hands clenched into fists. Jake stood there, his face dark with something I couldn't quite read, but he didn't argue back. He simply tried to placate her, his voice soft, coaxing. "Chloe, calm down." The The doctor said you shouldn't get upset. It's bad for the baby. I don't care about the baby. I want that coat. Go buy it for me now. Her demand echoed through the house, and I couldn't help but notice the sense of entitlement in her voice. Chloe, I'll buy it for you next time, okay? I already spent my allowance for this month. I watched as Jake carefully guided her to a seat, his patience clearly running thin. But Chloe wasn't finished. It's your fault you're still just a captain? She spat, her words dripping with disdain. Did you give your money to your sister instead? Jake's expression shifted, the edge of irritation growing sharper. Chloe, don't be ridiculous. Sarah and I are over. It's finished. Over? Chloe's voice raised in disbelief, her eyes narrowing. Do you think I'm stupid? You write to her constantly. You think I don't know? You don't care about me at all. You only care about her. Chloe's voice cracked as she pounded her fists against Jake's chest, tears streaming down her face. Jake's face tightened with impatience, his patience clearly wearing thin. I told you, there's nothing between us, he said flatly, but his tone was more defensive than convincing. I stood frozen in the doorway, watching the scene unfold before me. A surge of bitter amusement swept over me, bitter because I'd been here before. But in this life, it was different. In my past life, Jake had hidden his communication with Chloe from me, carefully keeping secrets while I remained in the dark. But now, he was hiding his letters to me from Chloe, desperately trying to maintain the facade of loyalty to both of us. He wanted both of us, unable or unwilling to commit to either. The realization hit me like a slap. He was still the same, and I was still the fool, caught in the middle of his lies. Mrs. Miller was the first to notice me as I stood there in the hallway, lingering awkwardly. Her eyes lit up with a mix of surprise and relief. "Sarah, you're back!" she exclaimed, her voice high with emotion. Come and talk to Chloe. She's been so difficult lately. You know how she is." She reached for my hand, her grip light but insistent, as though pulling me into the chaos of the house. Her tone was pleading, desperate even, but I could see the weariness in her eyes. She had always been the matriarch, but now her strength seemed diminished. I pulled my hand away gently, the air thick with unspoken words. "I'm tired. I'm going to rest in my room," I said quietly, the weight of my decision settling over me like a heavy cloak. Mrs. Miller's face fell instantly, the disappointment too apparent to miss. She opened her mouth to protest but seemed to think better of it, her shoulders slumping as she turned back to Chloe, who was still in the midst of her tirade. The dynamics of the house had shifted, and I could feel the difference as I walked away. She was a far cry from the domineering woman I remembered. She seemed small now, lost in the undertow of Chloe's demands, trying to keep the peace even at the cost of her own well-being. I made my way up the stairs, the familiar creak of the floorboards underfoot, almost comforting in its predictability. When I reached my room, I let the door click shut behind me, sealing out the noise of the downstairs chaos. I set my bag down on the bed and pulled out the carefully wrapped gift Ethan had given me for New Year's, a red cashmere scarf. The softness of the fabric was a stark contrast to the cold, brittle emotions swirling in my chest. I unraveled it slowly, savoring the feel of it between my fingers. As I draped it around my neck, I studied myself in the mirror. The scarf was a striking shade of red, vibrant and full of warmth, and for a moment, it was like the world outside my room faded away. A small smile touched my lips, the first one in a long time. It wasn't because I was happy, but because it felt like a piece of me, something tangible, something real. It was a symbol of moving forward, of trying to rebuild something from the ashes of the past. For the first time in a while, I felt a flicker of hope. That evening, a knock came at the door. I hesitated for a moment before walking over and opening it. Standing there was Jake, looking haggard and anxious, his eyes shadowed with a mixture of desperation and guilt. "Sarah, we need to talk," he said, his voice low, almost pleading. I stepped aside to let him in, the air between us thick with tension. As soon as he entered, he wrung his hands nervously, his movements almost frantic. "Sarah, you've always been the wife I truly wanted," he blurted out, his voice tight with emotion. "I've been waiting for you." I couldn't help but scoff, the bitterness that had been building inside me surfacing. "Waiting for me? Jake, do you even believe that yourself?" His face faltered, but he pressed on, clearly rattled. "Chloe's temper has gotten worse, and she spends money like water. He trailed off, looking almost helpless. I laughed, but it was a cold, humorless sound. "You were waiting for me while you got Chloe pregnant? What do you take me for, Jake?" His face flushed, and panic flashed in his eyes as though he hadn't expected my response. "Sarah, let me explain." I cut him off before he could continue. "There's nothing to explain. You and Chloe are having a baby, Jake. There's nothing left to say." I looked at him, feeling a growing sense of finality. "I wish you both the best." The words left my mouth with a strange finality, like a door slamming shut. He was silent for a moment, as if caught in a memory. Then, almost hesitantly, he spoke again. "I've been having dreams where you're the one I married." His voice was quiet, as though sharing a secret, but the words felt like daggers. "You were so kind and gentle, taking care of my parents back home," he continued, his gaze distant, lost in the fog of his own thoughts. He paused, then added with a tinge of pain, "But in the dream, I only had eyes for Chloe. I neglected you. I hurt you. I was a jerk." His face crumpled as if the weight of his own guilt was suffocating him. "And I made our son force you to divorce me," he whispered, almost as if he were confessing something from another lifetime. The words hit me harder than I expected. He was dreaming of our past life, a life I no longer wanted to relive. He covered his face with his hands, his voice muffled. "I wronged you in that dream, and now I want to make it up to you." I fought to control my anger, my voice a cold, measured calm. "If you really want to make amends, then take care of Chloe and your child, and leave me alone. That's best for both of us." His eyes dimmed at my words, the reluctance in his voice unmistakable. "But I keep feeling like you're the one who's meant to be with me." My patience finally snapped. The anger I had been suppressing surged to the surface, cold and unforgiving. "Jake, you need to leave. This isn't something you should be saying, and this isn't where you should be." I stood, my eyes hard, a finality in my gaze that I could feel even in the air around us. He lingered for a moment, as though searching for something to say, but nothing came. With a dejected sigh, he stood up and walked out of my room, his steps heavy with regret. I watched him go, feeling nothing but an eerie emptiness settle in my chest. In both lifetimes, he wavered between two women, greedily wanting both. He had never truly chosen, and he never would. As the door clicked shut behind him, the realization hit me like a wave. Since Jake and Chloe were living here now, there was no reason for me to stay. The Miller house was never my home. It was a place where I had been expected to fit into someone else's narrative, a place that had never welcomed me. The thought of leaving felt oddly freeing, like shedding a skin I had never wanted to wear in the first place. The next morning, I packed my bags, my movements mechanical, as if preparing for a departure I had already mentally rehearsed 100 times. I walked down the hall and knocked on Mrs. Miller's door, my heart heavy but resolute. When she opened it, I handed her a bank card. "Thank you for everything you've done for me over the years. This is the money I've saved," I continued. "Please accept it as a token of my gratitude for raising me." Mrs. Miller hesitated, her hands trembling slightly as she tried to push the card back. "Sarah, I don't know what to say." I pressed the card back into her palm. "Take it," I insisted, lifting my suitcase with one hand. "I need to get back to school. Goodbye." I didn't wait for a reply, turning away quickly and walking down the familiar hall toward the front door. Stepping out of the Miller house, I felt a curious emptiness, but no regret. I was done, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was making the right decision. The line at the ticket counter was longer than I expected, and the crowded terminal felt suffocating. I ran a hand through my hair in frustration, trying to calm the rising panic in my chest. Where was I supposed to go now? I couldn't sleep on the streets, not with winter approaching, and no real plan in mind. Just as my nerves were about to get the better of me, I heard someone call my name. Sarah. I turned and saw Ethan approaching, several shopping bags in hand. His face lit up when he saw me, as if encountering an old friend in the middle of chaos. "Ethan!" I exclaimed, genuinely surprised. "What a coincidence! You're from Millerton too?" "Yeah," he said with a grin. But then his eyes widened, his expression turning concerned. "Wait, don't tell me you have nowhere to go?" His voice softened, tinged with worry. I felt my chest tighten. I hadn't intended for him to find out about my situation, but the concern in his eyes made it impossible to lie. "Why don't you spend the holidays with my family?" Ethan suggested, his tone earnest. "It's just me and my grandma. It's pretty quiet. You'd liven things up." I hesitated, my mind racing. "Oh, I couldn't impose on you," I said, feeling uncomfortable with the idea of accepting such an offer. "Nonsense," he interrupted with a playful grin, but there was a sincerity in his voice that made me pause. "It'll be fine. My grandma's pretty lonely, and I'm sure she'd love the company. Besides, I don't like the idea of you being alone during the holidays." His eyes softened as he added, "Please, Sarah, just keep my poor grandma company. She gets so bored by herself." His pleading expression was enough to make me laugh. It was impossible to say no to someone who cared that much. With a resigned smile, I nodded. "All right," I said, the tension in my shoulders easing. "I'll come." Ethan's face brightened immediately, and the sense of relief was palpable. "Great, let's go then. It's only a short drive." As he led me out of the terminal, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was a new chapter, one I hadn't expected, but would gladly embrace. Being with Ethan and his grandmother, even for a short while, would be a welcome change, a break from everything that had come before. Stepping out of the train station, a gust of cold wind sliced through the air, making me shiver. Before I could react, Ethan was beside me, slipping off his coat and draping it over my shoulders. A faint woody scent lingered in the fabric, a comforting warmth that quickly spread through me, melting the chill of the winter air. "Cold. Millerton's much colder than Miami," Ethan commented, his voice tinged with amusement. I shook my head, grateful for his gesture, the warmth from his coat settling in. "I'll be fine," I said. But the warmth spreading through me had less to do with the coat and more to do with his kindness. Ethan's house was in the old part of Millerton, a charming 2-story building with ivy creeping up the walls, the kind of house that seemed to whisper of memories and stories. As we stepped into the yard, the savory scent of something delicious reached my nose, making my stomach growl in anticipation. Standing at the kitchen door was a silver-haired woman, her face lighting up as she saw us. "Ethan, you're home," she called with a smile, her eyes twinkling as they shifted to me. "And who is this?" Her gaze softened as she took in my features, and her voice warmed with affection. My, you've brought home a beautiful young lady this year." I blushed, looking down shyly, suddenly aware of my disheveled appearance. "Grandma, this is Sarah Miller, a friend of mine," Ethan said with a smile, clearly amused by my reaction. "Well, well, well," Grandma Carter exclaimed, clapping her hands together. "Come in and get warm. I'm sure you're freezing." She ushered us inside with the kind of energy only an older person with a heart full of love could have, then bustled back toward the kitchen. Ethan, ever the gentleman, took my suitcase and led me upstairs to the guest room. The room was small but cozy, with warm hues of soft wood and pastel accents. The bed linen smelled faintly of sunshine, like a field of flowers on a summer afternoon, and the softness of the quilt made the space feel even more inviting. "Rest for a bit," Ethan said softly, setting down my suitcase at the foot of the bed. Dinner will be ready soon. I nodded gratefully, sinking down onto the edge of the bed. Through the window, I watched the snow fall, the delicate flakes dancing through the dim light, each one unique and beautiful in its own way. A sense of peace and tranquility settled over me, the stillness of the moment soothing the tension I hadn't realized I was carrying. Maybe this was what it felt like to have a home, somewhere I was welcome, somewhere I could belong, even if just for a short while. That night, we sat around the dining table, savoring the steaming hot dumplings Grandma Carter had lovingly prepared. The aroma filled the room, making my stomach growl in anticipation. Grandma, with a gleam of warmth in her eyes, kept piling food onto my plate, her kindness overwhelming. "You're always welcome here," she said, her voice gentle but firm, as though she meant every word. I smiled, my heart warmed by her hospitality. "Thank you, Grandma. This means a lot to me." After dinner, Ethan suggested a walk in the nearby park. The thought of getting some fresh air after such a cozy meal was too inviting to refuse. The winter park was quiet, eerily so, with only a few couples scattered across the paths, huddled together against the cold, enjoying the solitude and stillness. The soft crunch of snow underfoot was the only sound as we walked slowly along the edge of the frozen lake, our breath rising in delicate clouds in the frigid air. We walked in comfortable silence, the weight of unspoken words hanging between us, but not in an uncomfortable way. The snowflakes fell from the sky like delicate whispers, dusting our coats with a fine layer of powdered sugar, soft and cold. Finally, I broke the silence, my voice quiet but sincere. "Thank you, Ethan." He glanced at me with curiosity. "For what?" I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts. "For taking me in. For giving me a warm place to stay when I had nowhere else to go." Ethan looked at me, his eyes sparkling with mischief, a playful glint flickering in them. "How about you marry me as repayment?" I blinked, stunned for a moment, before I let out a mock haughty sniff. "In your dreams." Despite the playful tone of my words, I felt a flutter of something inside me. I quickly dismissed it, though, not wanting to overthink it. Ethan continued, as if on cue, his tone exaggerated for effect. "So, how are you going to repay your hero? I did rescue you from the perils of the train station, you know." His dramatic tone made me laugh out loud. "Hero? Sounds more like you're trying to extort me." He pretended to think deeply for a moment, then grinned, saying with mock seriousness, "Let me see. How about you cook me dinner every day until school starts?" I rolled my eyes, shaking my head. "In your dreams, I'm not a very good cook." His grin widened. "That's okay, I'm not picky." I raised an eyebrow, teasing him back. "Besides, even if your cooking is terrible, I'll eat every last bite." His playful teasing made me laugh harder. "Is that how you show gratitude? Sounds like you're just trying to take advantage of me." He sighed dramatically, his lips curving into a smile. "Oh, I guess my charm isn't working." Then suddenly he leaned in closer, his face inches from mine. "Maybe I should try harder." My heart raced at his proximity and I instinctively stepped back, flustered. Don't do anything crazy." He laughed at my reaction, clearly enjoying the effect he had on me. "Just kidding," he said, then gently reached out to ruffle my hair, his touch light and affectionate. "Come on, let's go back. Grandma will be worried." Back at the Carter house, the warmth of the house enveloped us. Grandma had prepared hot ginger tea, the spicy scent filling the air, adding to the comfort of the evening. Sipping the tea, I sat in the cozy atmosphere, surrounded by the flickering light of the fireplace and the soft hum of conversation from Ethan and Grandma. I felt a flicker of hope for the future, something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in a long time. Maybe letting go of the past and starting over wasn't such a bad thing after all. On New Year's Eve, the night sky was set ablaze with fireworks. The deafening sound of firecrackers echoed through the air, and I watched, mesmerized by the explosion of colors lighting up the night. Standing by the window, I felt as if I were in a completely different world. a world where everything felt possible again. The excitement and the promise of the new year mingled with the peacefulness of the present, creating a feeling I couldn't quite describe. "Happy New Year, Sarah." Ethan's voice was soft but close, his warm breath tickling my ear. I turned to face him, our eyes locking. Time seemed to slow as our gazes met, and for a moment, everything else disappeared. My heart skipped a beat, and I felt a warmth spread through me, as though his presence alone was enough to make everything feel right. "Happy New Year, Ethan," I whispered, my voice barely audible. He leaned in, his breath warm against my cheek, and whispered, "I like you, Sarah." Outside, the fireworks continued to burst in a kaleidoscope of colors, their vibrant hues reflected on my face and on Ethan's as we stood there, suspended in the moment. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be,